Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, September 11th. Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see not a whole lot going on. A small gale in the far southeast Pacific, generating 28-foot seas, aimed east at Chile, but not at the U.S. West Coast, certainly not at Hawaii, and nowhere else in our forecast window. But things are supposed to start looking better. First up, we'll take a look at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when those gales do form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough. There is the northern branch of the jet, and you can see it pretty clearly here, running along the 30 south latitude line from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. And then the southern branch here running roughly around 60 south. No real troughs are in evidence. That is, a trough would be a dip to the north in the jet, a curve like this. That would support a clockwise flow in the upper atmosphere and down at the surface. That is equivalent or indicative of low pressure, and low pressure, of course, generates winds. Winds generate seas. Seas, when they radiate away from the fetch area, produce swell, and swell, when it hits your beach, produces surf. So right now we have what's known as a zonal flow here in the South Pacific. Winds running basically flat west to east across the Pacific. No real troughs obvious. We'll roll this out, and you see more of the same. You get this little pocket of wind here on Tuesday up to 140 knots, and a little bit of a northward tilt there, but nothing particularly strong. And then again come on Wednesday night, something that almost looks like a legitimate trough right here. You'd really want to see it arch more to the north, but it doesn't. Right there maybe, and that's supportive of gale development. And so there's an opportunity. And then back to the zonal flow as we get into the weekend, and continuing on out from there. Another trough forecast here. And now here's a semi-legitimate trough here. Not a lot of wind areas associated with it. What is that? 110 knot winds maybe right in this area. But maybe that's supportive of gale development. But at 180 hours out, the odds of it actually forming are pretty low. So for right now, the jet stream kind of looks ambiguous. Nothing real remarkable about it. Let's go take a look down at the surface and see what's going on. So here we go, surface level pressure, surface level winds. These are winds right on the ocean surface. And as expected, there's a little gale here in the far southeast Pacific. What is that, 64 millibars. Not particularly deep, a little bit of 30 knot winds associated with it. Nothing particularly strong. We're really looking for 40 knot or stronger winds. We see that starting to develop Monday here, southwest of New Zealand. Now notice these winds are actually almost aimed southeast, but there's kind of a broader fetch behind that of 35 to 30 knot winds blowing from the west. And that fetch kind of lifts, the winds turn more to the west, and it sort of lifts north into Monday night, and then continues, and then you get into Tuesday night, early Wednesday. Here we go, 12Z Wednesday, 45 knot winds, aimed to the northeast. Good odds for churning up the ocean surface, producing some seas. And we'll just see how this goes. And we got 45 knot winds continuing into Wednesday night, into Thursday, and almost some little pockets of 50 knot winds in there into almost Friday. And then additional low pressure moves into the southeast Pacific, making more 45 knot winds into Saturday. And there we go, 50 knot winds into Saturday. And let's see how more, and yet more. Whoa, my goodness, look at this. So you get into Sunday, we're almost a week out, 55 knot winds right on the southern edge of the California swell window, really aimed more at Chile, but still you get a pretty, some decent, theoretically, swell could radiate north from that towards California, certainly not for Hawaii. And then we go on out, and there we go, 180 hours. Still, good, solid-looking system. Prime target would be Chile for this, but still, good energy up into Central America, Mexico, and targets north of there. Let's go take a look at the wave models now, see what effect these winds will have on the ocean surface. So here we are. Significant wave heights, as we saw before. Not a whole lot going on. But theoretically, as we move into, here we go, Monday night, we saw that zonal flow setting up in the jet stream. Down at the surface, 28-foot seas starting to develop, just barely almost 30-foot seas, that one little tiny notch right there Monday night. Then we get into Tuesday, a better defined area of 30-foot seas into Tuesday night, building to 32, almost 34 feet into Wednesday, 36 feet into Wednesday evening, and building more was at 38-foot seas in that one little spot right there, and then to 40 feet and 42, and just sort of goes up there into what is about the 45-foot range. Now, not over a huge area, but aimed fairly well to the north. Certainly good for south-angled swell for California. We'll actually go back here. Relative to Hawaii, yes, so Hawaii's at about 155 right here. So, yes, but most of this energy is east of the 155 line, and really most of it's, again, targeting Peru and Chile. Anyway, we roll this out into next weekend, Saturday. Seas generated, but now the cutoff for Southern California is about 117. So, yeah, that probably not a whole lot of swell from that little fetch area. And then more you get into, here we go, we're out at 174 hours into Sunday night. And most of this is right on the hairy edge of the Southern California swell window, but still potential, if one were to believe the charts, for Southern California to get some good south-angled swell. The interesting thing about this whole run of charts is once you get into Monday or Tuesday, it's pretty much nonstop, some sort of southern hemi fetch in play, meaning some sort of swell, maybe not huge swell, but small, rideable surf, likely for the U.S. West Coast. That is good news. And that after just having a good, nice little run of southern hemi swell still in play now. When did that start? It started Thursday or so, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of this past weekend, and it'll be fading out on Monday. We'll get about a week break, and then the whole thing's going to start up again. So not too bad for late in the summer. Likewise, we do the same thing for the northern hemisphere. Notice the jet stream looking pretty good. One gale has already formed in the northern dateline region right here. We'll show you some of that info. But let's just run through the jet stream charts for the next week. We see the jet stream doing pretty well, down around 43 degrees north, right around there. That's a good position for this time of year, and not super strong, but with 140, 145 knot winds. Notice no split in the jet stream, a consolidated flow running across. That is worth noting. And here you get a bit of a trough, theoretically, on Friday here in the western Gulf of Alaska. And then another little pulse of energy come almost a week out here, coming off the Kuril Islands, and actually building some. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4. That'd be about 170 knot winds or so. 170 knot winds, and a bit of a trough trying to carve out here again. Get a counterclockwise flow in the northern hemisphere. That's low pressure again, and that's 180 hours out. So the jet stream looking reasonable. Let's go take a look at surface level pressure. So here we go, surface level pressure, surface level winds. Notice a tropical system, tropical storm Orlean, southwest of Cabo San Lucas, tracking northwest. Forecast to build to hurricane strength in a day or so with winds in the 80 knot range. And because it's supposed to have this north-northwest sort of track, good odds of some swell resulting into Southern California and maybe even Northern California. Not huge or anything, maybe 3 feet, maybe 4 feet at 13 seconds or something, but rideable swell. Also notice a circulation here. This is associated with what was a low pressure this weekend over the northern dateline region. We'll get into some of the details on that in a minute. And yet another low pressure being fed by the jet stream pulling off of Kamchatka, moving to the east. And here we go into Monday, 30 to 35 knot winds, building to 40 or almost 45 knot winds. That will get good purchase on the ocean surface. You can also watch our tropical system here. Another tropical system off in the western Pacific, but it is not supposed to recurve north or northeast and do anything of interest. Anyway, so we watch this system here on Tuesday, making it to the northern dateline region. Again, Tuesday afternoon, 40 knot winds, and continuing in some fashion into Thursday before it finally dies out in the western Gulf of Alaska. And then our tropical system, Orleans, heading now to the west, moving towards Hawaii, and then it's supposed to make a turn off to the northwest at some point, and probably cause no direct impact to the Hawaiian Islands other than perhaps some small swell coming out of the east-northeast. We're out 180 hours. The North Pacific looks to be kind of quiet, but you can see low pressure here, low pressure here, and with a favorable jet stream flow aloft, the odds of yet more activity, swell-producing systems look favorable, especially since we're moving towards the fall. Let's go take a look at significant wave heights. So we're going to go back in time a little bit here. We're into Friday morning right there. The remnants of Lester moved into Canada. No real swell of interest generated, but there was fetch that we saw here. It moved over the northern dateline region on Friday. That was 2 days ago. Created a small area of 20-foot seas, and it pushed up to about 23 feet. Actually, we'll get this centered a little bit better here. So you can see here's max significant wave height over the whole region. But wherever there's the X and the little plus sign, so the plus sign is max significant wave heights. This is where it was right here. And the winds, 41 knots right there. And we'll roll this out. Continued 23-foot seas. Now notice Hawaii's down here, so most of the energy really was aimed right at Hawaii. Maybe a tiny bit of energy pushing into California from this system. And it faded out on Sunday. Whoops, we're expecting maybe 2 foot of swell at 13 or 14 seconds for California, but probably double that size into Hawaii. So the first little pulse of swell, fall season, working its way towards Hawaii. Let's go take a look at the forecast chart now. And here we go, significant wave heights. We'll roll this out. Notice, we'll look down here. I'll roll this back. Here's California. Here is Orleans heading to the northwest. And there you go. There's your little bit of energy. The circulation pattern here, counterclockwise. So winds pushing from the south right up into this little catcher's mitt called Southern California. Swell could result there. Also notice, here we are on Tuesday morning. Fetch pushing off Kamchatka, building almost 28-foot seas right there, making it to the dateline still in the 26-foot range into Wednesday, 22-foot seas into Thursday, still 20-foot seas. Now, good long distance away from California. We're talking 20, at this position here, maybe, about 2,400 nautical miles away. Lots of swell decay. Do not expect some big pumping swell. But it could be rideable. We're talking, 3 or 4 feet at, 15 seconds or something like that. Rideable, fun, nothing epic. Okay, and then Orleans heading off to the west. And we're into Saturday. Of course, this all, assumes that these charts are accurate, which they typically are not this far in advance. But still, a little bit of activity, and then some candidate areas looking to maybe blow up. A couple days beyond that, maybe next week, mid-next week or so. Something to monitor. So, the net takeaway here is southern hemi swell. Looks like it's going to develop, pushing its way to the north. At the same time, northern hemi swell, a small pulse already in the water, perhaps a larger one, but not large, going to develop midweek. And at that same time, in the southern hemisphere, a broader system. So both this north-south kind of swell thing going on. You're going to have to be careful in picking where you go surfing, what exposure the breaks have. The good news is the local wind pattern, for now at least, is to be pretty light over California with no strong high pressure, no local gradients going on, no strong northwest winds. Let's go take a look longer term into the future. Specifically we'll talk about the Madden-Julian oscillation and La Niña for 2016-2017. And the MJO, we talk about it a lot, but we don't really say what that means so much. But during the active phase of the MJO, the MJO tends to fuel the jet stream and also fuel storm development in the northern hemisphere in the winter months and the southern hemisphere in their winter months. And so we are always interested in looking for the active phase of the MJO. The inactive phase tends to put a damper on feeding energy to the jet stream and therefore tends to suppress storm development. So when looking for the active phase of the MJO, first there's this area we call it the Kelvin wave generation area. It runs from 135 east to about 170 west and 5 degrees north or south of the equator. So draw a box right there. What you're looking for is so trades are, you can look at the arrows here. This is all from buoy data, an array of buoys that are just strung the whole way across the equator. Normally looking for El Nino, but you can also use it to monitor the MJO. East winds, trades are in control, even over in the Kelvin wave generation area. But here, differences in normal for this time of year. We're just looking at the arrows, not the water temperatures here with the contours. You see, basically winds are normal for this time of year. If La Nina was reasonably strong or the inactive phase of the MJO was strong, you would see east anomalies, especially over here. We're not seeing that. And if La Nina was strong, you'd see east anomalies probably over this entire area. We're not seeing that. It's almost like it's a normal weather pattern. This chart depicts zonal wind anomalies. That is, east-west or west-east wind anomalies. This is over the whole planet. Kelvin wave generation area runs pretty much between these two major tick marks right here. The blues are easterly anomalies. That would be synonymous with the inactive phase of the MJO. And yellows, the active phase of the MJO. Now, what we're seeing here is here we are today, kind of a neutral pattern, but within 24 hours, easterly anomalies are forecast to build rather strong in the Kelvin wave generation area. One would think this is associated with the inactive phase of the MJO. I say it should, and one would think, but as you see as we get into the next series of charts, they're not really showing that this is more just a localized, temporary sort of thing. The MJO runs for 3 to 4 weeks in the inactive phase and 3 to 4 weeks in the active phase. So these winds would typically, you'd want to see them going for a couple weeks. This is only a 1 week forecast, and already when you get towards the end here, it kind of looks like things are supposed to weaken a bit. So maybe this is not associated with the inactive phase of the MJO. Here's another way to look for the presence of the MJO. These forecast charts, outgoing long wave radiation, the active phase of the MJO, Kelvin wave generation area is like right in here. If you saw a bunch of clouds here, and that would be the blues, less sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, that would be the active phase of the MJO. Yellows, if there's a big area of yellow right in here, yellows and orange, then you'd have more sunlight reflectivity. High pressure, that would be the inactive phase of the MJO. But looking at this, the statistic model for the next 2 weeks, dead neutral pattern is projected. The dynamic model suggests pretty much the same thing with maybe a tendency towards the active phase of the MJO, but an MJO that only lasts 4 days isn't really, 4 or 5 days isn't the active phase of the MJO. It's just some other temporary aberration. So no signs of the MJO on those charts. Phase diagrams. Assume you're looking down on the north pole of our planet, and the MJO typically rotates counterclockwise around the planet, or at least according to these charts, moving from the Indian Ocean, over the maritime continent, think Bali, that area, over the dateline, into the West Pacific, over the U.S., over the Atlantic, over Europe, back into the Indian Ocean. The heavy green dot is where the active phase of the MJO is right now. If it's within this circle, it's considered to be extremely weak. And so, per this, the ECMF model, the MJO is very weak, completely collapsed inside the cone of death, as some have called it, and no indication of the active phase of the MJO projected here where the green is for the next 2 weeks. Pretty much the same thing per the GEFS model, too. A very weak active MJO pattern. And yet, one more tool, the CFS model, again, looking down at the surface, actually 850 millibar winds is up about 4,000 feet, but a good proxy for what's going on at the ocean surface. Again, this is past history. In the past, oranges and yellows are westerly wind anomalies, blue are easterly anomalies. You look at this, you go, okay, there's a bit of blue easterly anomalies forecast here. We'll just bring this down. Here we go. Kelvin wave generation area is right between here. So you see this blue here. For the next week or so, easterly anomalies in play. Here we can overlay the MJO. And sure enough, there's a little bit of a weak, so the dotted contours are the inactive phase of the MJO. The active phase, this here, is moving out, fading away. Inactive phase coming in, but very weak and not even really, I mean, it's only a week or two duration. And then after that, just sort of this mixed pattern, the MJO, no dominant signs. That's what a more dominant active phase would look like. We see nothing like that, just fragments. I mean, really no MJO signal forecast until maybe November or so. And then, but notice, westerly anomalies here, forecast to take over the Kelvin wave generation area. But this model's been continually saying that, and every week it keeps pushing it out another week. So for right now, basically just a very weak MJO signal forecast for the next couple of months, next 2 months at least. That probably suggests no big forcing factor to either fuel storms or to suppress them. That's actually good news considering that we're supposed to be in La Niña. La Niña typically supports the inactive phase of the MJO, which actively puts a damper on storm production. If we have none of that in play, then it's pretty much maybe just a normal pattern as we work our way into winter, which wouldn't be so bad, especially considering that we're just coming off a strong El Nino. Typically, the pattern after that, the following year, is strong La Niña and active suppression of storm development. We're not seeing any of that now. This is good news. So we've talked about the MJO. That sort of gives you a sense of what's going to happen over the next 2 months or so, and basically we're seeing nothing in terms of the MJO, just a dead pattern, which again is good. Looking at the ocean though, what's going on there? What we're seeing, so this is actual water temperatures, West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Looking at depth, down 100 meters, 200 meters, these are the actual anchor lines of buoys strung across the equator, the whole way across the equator, across the Pacific, and sensors on those anchor lines, and you get to build sort of a subsurface water temperature profile. What we see is a lot of warm water in the east, warm water in the west, a lot of not cooler water, but less warm water in the east. What's been happening is this wall, sort of this, instead of a gradual, take that heavy contour right there, the 28-degree isotherm, instead of it slowly lifting, it's becoming more stratified with warm water in the west, cooler water in the east. That's pretty typical of some flavor of La Niña. Here's actual differences in temperature from normal. This is actually a plus better than what it was. Before we had this like river of cold water, started a couple of months ago, racing from at depth down around 150 meters from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, and that would be pretty typical of a developing strong La Niña, but all that kind of collapsed now. We got this one pocket here at 2 degrees below normal water, and another one here at about 1 degree below normal, and then a little bit warmer than normal water here, as would be expected. Another little pocket here off the Galapagos, but nothing that suggests a strong La Niña pattern at all. Certainly not El Nino, no Kelvin waves, nothing like that. Just sort of a mixed bag, a little bit cooler than normal, but not bad at all. The high-res model, as of September 5th, I think if we saw something that was here as of the 11th, you'd see that a lot of this cool water has broken down and is more fragmented than suggested in this image. And here's a view that puts it, gives you an idea what's going on over time. A year ago, October 2015, cool water in the West Pacific. This is the East Pacific over here. Kelvin wave, very warm water. This is the tail end of our El Nino. Kelvin wave number 4, number 5, number 6. Then cool water, the La Niña rushing in at depth in April of this year. But notice, it came in, and then it sort of started breaking up, and it's trying to regroup a little bit, but just as of August, just does not look impressive. That's a good thing for us. The weaker, the better. Let it stay that way as far as we're concerned. We don't want that big La Niña bounce back, and according to this chart, it is not happening. And sea level anomalies, this also gives you a sense of sort of what's going on in subsurface. Warmer than normal water. When we saw El Nino here, we had plus 10 or 15 centimeter anomalies. That suggests if you strip out all the waves, all the tides, all the chop, everything, and when you get sort of a bulge or a dip in the ocean right in this area here, that suggests when you have negatives, it suggests cold water at depth. when you have positive, it suggests warm water depth. Right now we have -5, maybe some -10 centimeter anomalies right in here. But you know what? That's actually improved from what it was a couple weeks ago, where it was down around -10 over a broader area, maybe -15. So this also suggests that La Nina, at least for the time being, is kind of losing some of its steam. That said, we're looking at actual ocean surface temperature anomalies differences, and normal for this time of year. We see a little bit of cool water here off of Peru. If you saw all warm water here, that's sort of indicative of El Nino. We wouldn't expect to see that. A little cool stream coming over the Galapagos and then building, pushing west from there. And this is pretty much your standard La Nina cool pool at the surface, but not markedly cold, just cooler than normal. Not particularly unexpected given last year's La Nina. And continuing along, the 7-day trend, little pockets of warmer, little pockets of cooler water trending. Notice here along Peru, pretty much a neutral, if not slightly warmer than normal pattern, all the way to the Galapagos, and then temperatures kind of cooling, but kind of warming, just not really doing a whole lot, nothing particularly impressive. Then here is the actual sea surface temperature anomalies. If we had some major La Nina going on, you'd see these blues all right in here. We're not seeing any of that. We're seeing pretty much a normal water temperature pattern all along South America to the Galapagos, and then this is our La Nina cool pool, but it's way displaced off to the west. That suggests in our mind that high pressure, which is typically associated with La Nina in winter months, would be displaced here, maybe more north of Hawaii. That could usher in backdoor fronts working their way down into California, providing snow and rain. The average swell direction, assuming high pressure did set up in this area, would be more northerly, not westerly. During El Ninos, your swell direction tends to be more west, both for Hawaii, and the storms the jet stream falls further south, but when you get a La Nina, high pressure sets up, pushes the jet stream north over here over the North Pacific, and then maybe whatever storms do form are isolated to the Gulf of Alaska, giving you a more northerly swell direction. But that's speculation at this point in time. But for right now, La Nina looks to be westward displaced. So it's interesting to look at sea surface temperatures and assume that there's some sort of La Nina in play, though it looks very weak. Down at the subsurface, you can see evidence of La Nina, but on a lot of other charts, you don't really even hardly see that. Whatever La Nina there is, it's very weak. In fact, NOAA came out last week and basically said we're not even in La Nina. We're ENSO neutral. El Nino Southern Oscillation Index, we're neutral. We're not even strong enough to officially classify what we're seeing on the charts as a La Nina. Still, we're calling it a weak La Nina for now. Now, looking at the Southern Oscillation Index, this is what affect those cooler waters that we saw on the equator in the Central Pacific that are having on the atmosphere above it. And so the Southern Oscillation Index, differences in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti, when you see positive numbers, that suggests the inactive phase of the MJO. It also could suggest, if the numbers are positive long enough, the development of La Nina. Current data suggesting all positive, with today's value 12.36, but you kind of look back here, you saw a little bit of negatives, but it's been positive since August 20th. So coming up here almost on a month. The 30-day running average is plus 7.55 as of today. That is certainly indicative of the inactive phase of the MJO and or La Nina. The 90-day running average also, notice it's building from, 2.8, and now we're up to about 5.2. So maybe some very minimal weak flavor of La Nina. And you can graph the 30-day SOI average. So here we are back in 2014, the start of El Nino, and it went into 2015. You see the SOI just got negative. We were down around -22, -23. These are actual spikes and peaks in the MJO. Okay, and now we're in this long-running, looks like a inactive phase of the MJO, and the SOI trying to creep up. It's at, according to this, what's that, about about 7, which is about right. But not strongly up in like we were down here at -20 or so. If it was a strong La Nina, we should be positive in the 15 or 20 range, nowhere close to that. Very, very weak La Nina territory. Likewise, the ESPI index, it is much like the Southern Oscillation Index, only it measures differences in absolute rainfall between the area north of Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti here. Positive numbers say more precipitation in here, less precipitation here. That would suggest El Nino. Negative numbers, today's value, minus 0.68, and it's been hovering there for a couple of weeks now. Suggests less rainfall in this area, more over here, which is indicative of La Nina. So this suggests a very, very weak La Nina in play. And we didn't show this before, but this is actual sea surface temperatures, deviations from normal in the Niña 3.4 region. That's that area north of Tahiti, basically. And here's been the trend. Our last little bit of El Nino, this was back in the June time frame. Here was the peak of La Nina, at least so far, around July 20th or so, minus 1 degree. And then you can just see the temperature oscillating in 2 or 3 week kind of cycles. Currently, as of September 11th, down at about minus 0.9 degrees again, but you saw draw a line through all this, and the average could easily be interpreted to be half a degree or minus 0.6. Again, not really indicative of La Nina, or very weakly so. And finally, the forecast, and this is what's really kind of interesting. So here we were back October, January time frame last year, 3 degree difference above normal temperatures, clearly indicating El Nino. This is in the Niña 3.4 region, again, that area from about 120 west to 175 degrees north and south of the equator. And then we saw as we got into this year, temperatures declined as El Nino declined, moving into La Nina territory in July, but it didn't really go any deeper than maybe a half a degree below normal. And here we are somewhere in here, still roughly half a degree below normal. And the forecast is actually improving to maybe 0.4 degrees in October, and then dipping back down to 0.5 in December or so. And then from there, it looks as if La Nina just dies completely, and then we move back into positive territory. Find that hard to believe. But at least, somewhere a couple tenths of a degree either side of neutral would be fine. That would say that La Nina is not going to happen. As we've said before, the thought is, if this is really the way things play out and we sort of move back into this neutral territory come February or so, then that's a clear indicator that the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, this 15 to 25 year cycle that goes sort of like El Nino to La Nina swings, it's been in a cold phase, a La Nina-like pattern since 1998, and the thought is that we are starting to move towards the active phase of it. If that were the case, it would definitely dampen any La Nina bounce back from this strong of an El Nino, and that would suggest that the atmosphere would be more conducive to storm development both in summer and winter months, and that our surf pattern might significantly increase for the better for a period of 15 to 25 years starting now on forward. Too early to declare that's a fact right now, but the charts seem to be suggesting that, and what we're seeing in the ocean, the atmosphere, also seems to suggest that. So, for now, the Northern Hemisphere trying to come online weekly, but giving it a shot. One small gale has already formed over the northern dateline region. Another one forecast in the next few days, a little bit stronger. Hawaii maybe to see some swell later in the week from this system, and even California by the weekend. Small little pulse maybe. Southern Hemisphere in the meantime supposed to wake up again. Another gale building its way across, working its way across the South Pacific, maybe with seas up to 40 feet. Have to watch the charts on that. In the meantime, the MJO pretty much neutral, no push one way or the other forecast for the next month or two at least. And La Nina, yeah, it's there just barely, officially not even there. But we're going to go ahead and say, yeah, we're in very, very weak La Nina territory, but that might be short-lived, and we might be out of the woods come February or so. Something to keep watching for. So that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.